Associate Professor Walter Theseira.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the Resource Sustainability Bill is part of a wider movement in Singapore that recognizes the way that we consume, produce and live our lives must change to ensure that our children have a sustainable future. The bill has to be read in conjunction with the inaugural Zero Waste Master Plan, which sets a bold target to reduce per capita landfill waste by 30% by 2030, while promoting the development of a circular economy that generates efficiencies from reducing and reusing waste. Sir, I took a look at the history of recycling as a topic of debate in Parliament. Now, if you exclude the recycling of water, the first time Parliament debated the merits of recycling was in the 1983 budget debate. The Honourable Member, Mr. Eric Cheong Yen Chi, suggested that the Economic Development Board set up industries to recycle industrial waste. Recycling was quiescent for some years after, but it has been resurrected of late. I think the Minister for the Environment and Water Resources must feel that recycling has been debated at nearly every other sitting in the last few years. Now, why does recycling have new urgency? Were we a nation of conscientious recyclers until recently, or have we been shocked from our wasteful slumber? Sir, the waste and inefficiency we see in our consumerist society is really a symptom of economic growth. It is like some fat around the middle, a bit of a sign that times are very good for most Singaporeans. And like excess fat, trimming it will do us some good. I submit that recycling was hardly discussed from independence through 1980 because we were not rich yet. Recycling is both the necessity of the poor and the luxury of the rich. It was obvious to the post-independent Singaporean that our appliances, our TVs, radios, fridges and stoves had to be repaired, refurbished, reused for as long as possible. It was obvious that letting food spoil today meant less food on the table tomorrow. Within our lifetime, many of us remember a vibrant, privately organized recycling industry for many of the waste targeted by this bill. The Karanguni men had a good trade in fixing and recycling scrap. Even food waste was collected for use by the pig farmers. So why did that grassroots recycling system break down? The problem is the economics. The value of scrap materials are low. The costs of new manufacture are also low. Meanwhile, the cost of labor required to repair, refurbish or repurpose waste has increased significantly. Consider the problem of plastic bottles. Members will remember when soft drinks were sold in glass bottles. When you finish your drink, the glass bottle would be collected and it would be washed and refilled at the factory. This practice has ceased because the cost of refilling have become too high compared to the cost of providing single-use plastic or glass bottles. So, sir, it's really a problem of prices. The goods that we consume, from consumer appliances to bottled drinks to food, they have no price attached to reflect the problems that their disposal will create. Even in countries where bottle deposits and other taxes are applied to encourage recycling, the prices appear to be incorrect and too low. We know this because the world's recycling infrastructure has essentially collapsed in just a few years. As The Economist pointed out in an article on June 15, 2019, and I quote, "There is no point collecting recyclable waste unless someone is willing to buy it and actually do the recycling." Until late 2017, China was the world's biggest importer of scrap by far. All this came to a halt when the Chinese government banned the import of all but the purest scrap material in 2017, killing a trade worth $24 billion a year, end quote. The recycling trade is ironically unsustainable, premised on the assumption that the cost of recycling in developing countries would remain artificially low forever. But these countries no longer wish to accept the world's trash. So what is heartening about this bill and the master plan is that it confronts these economic realities squarely for the most part. It does not depend on the illusion of cheap recycling in some faraway land. It recognizes that real costs will be required to improve sustainability in Singapore. Now I wish to discuss the three areas of focus in the bill: electrical and electronic equipment waste, packaging and food waste. First, let me commend the extended producer responsibility framework. EEE producers simply have little incentive to consider seriously how their products will be disposed of at the end of life. it is sufficient that they should bear responsibility for managing the life cycle cost of their products. My only concern here is how the regulatory costs will affect competition in this sector. Sir, the retail sector for EEE is very diverse, ranging from large branded retailers to small and medium enterprises. Many retailers now operate largely or exclusively online. Many of them are foreign retailers. The distribution channels are also diverse. While many brands only have a few authorized retailers in Singapore, parallel imports are common. This competition has been good for Singaporeans. We should ensure that regulation preserves competition as far as possible, while ensuring that retailers live up to their responsibilities. The question is how the EPR framework can be customized for the needs and business models of the different stakeholders in the EEE retail space. At the moment, large EEE retailers are the focus of regulation. They will be expected to facilitate the disposal of e-waste for any products they supply. For example, Section 15 provides that large retailers must offer in-store collection facilities. Because collection of e-waste is not and should not be tied to new sales, large retailers are essentially providing a public service by using their scarce retail space. Now, if all the retailers were large, this would not distort competition, because all would be facing the same burden. But smaller retailers and online retailers appear that they will escape this particular responsibility. How then can we ensure that all retailers face the same regulatory costs? One possibility is to impose the appropriate prepaid disposal fee on new EEE products at the point of sale in Singapore, regardless of how they are supplied. While the administrative burden may at first seem significant, especially for smaller retailers, the economies of scale of market platforms today mean that a high proportion of EEE products are actually retailed or sold through only one of a few websites. While I understand there may be reluctance to impose new government fees, the EPR will in any case result in costs for retailers which will be passed on to consumers. What is more important is that competition is preserved for consumers, as this could more than offset any increases in cost. Next, the problem of excessive packaging. I see the problem of excess packaging, at least for consumer goods, as essentially a coordination failure. Packaging is cheap, but branding is valuable. Retailers would prefer to use less packaging, but because we often believe attractive packaging is a sign of a product's quality, we encourage retailers to compete on how elaborate the packaging is. Now, those who have visited Japan know that the Japanese, despite their attention to recycling, are completely buried in excessive packaging. This bill will lay the groundwork for an eventual EPR framework for packaging waste. But we have to be cautious about the tools that we use to enforce this framework. While I am not one to shy away from taxes when necessary, we have to avoid what the economist Professor Ng Yu Kwang calls the diamond good effect. In a world with substantial packaging taxes, an over-packaged product is likely to be an excellent signal of the purchaser's wealth. Sir, it appears that the mooncake industry has completely internalized this principle. One can hardly find the more luxurious mooncakes sold in plain boxes anymore. It appears that showing you can afford an expensive mooncake is far more important than how the mooncake actually tastes. To guard against making packaging appear even more valuable, perhaps we should consider creating limits on the amount of packaging that can be used. This would encourage firms to compete on value, taste, and price instead. That's what really matters. Now on food waste. We are accustomed now to seeing food stalls, restaurants, and hotels throwing out massive amounts of uneaten food. This bill will provide for the proper disposal of such food waste. But obviously, we must also focus efforts on reducing the volume of food waste in the first place. It may seem like a mystery why food retailers have so much wasted food, given that they lose money on unsold food. The problem seems to lie in how we as consumers make choices. Who among us likes to pick the last piece of fish at the economy rice stall? How do we feel if we attend an event and the buffet runs out? I think it will be difficult to change our beliefs about food abundance and quality. We basically like to see an abundance of food as a signal of quality. And this may be evolutionarily hardwired. But we can encourage retailers to use technology and analytics to better plan how to serve their customers. Raina Loy, a student at the Singapore University of Social Sciences, is running a startup, Good for Food, that uses AI-enabled dustbins to automatically identify and log the type of food waste disposed. Good for Food has helped clients cut food waste by up to 30 to 40% through better planning. And finally, some thoughts on the role of economics and culture in managing our waste problem. So it's common to frame the problem of sustainability as one of a consumerist culture, as if changing our culture or refusing plastic straws is the obvious solution to the sustainability problem. I think we need to recognize the central role of prices and regulation in setting our behavior on a more sustainable path. I agree there are some cultural practices that resist economic explanation that harm sustainability. For example, our preference for meat products instead of vegetable or insect protein, that's a leading factor in unsustainable consumption. Impossible Foods and Beyond Burger, which market meat-free burger patties that taste like beef, they've made headlines in Singapore and throughout the world. Now, I found this incredible because Chinese vegetarians have been producing all manner of mock meats for centuries. So there's nothing new there but clever marketing. There is potential, therefore, to change our food culture, but I dare say the government will not want to be the one to tell us to order mee siam, my cockroach. So perhaps it's best to leave that to the private sector. Now, there's also much interest in behavioral interventions to promote recycling and more consideration for the environment. These are all valuable interventions. Consumer recycling, for example, seems to be strongly driven by social norms, since recycling rates do vary widely across the world, even in the absence of strong local regulations. The planned improvements in recycling signs for our blue bins will no doubt enhance recycling rates by providing more salient information to households on how to recycle. Social norm interventions, where people are told how their consumption patterns compare with that of their neighbors, have also been shown to generate sustained reductions in energy use in large-scale randomized trials. But we should resist the temptation to believe that education and behavioral interventions alone can generate sustained change in consumption habits or eliminate a throw-away culture. The throw-away culture exists because it is cheap, sir. And this basic underpricing and lack of regulation of unsustainable resources must stop. We should not believe that sustainability branding can overcome basic economics. At some point this year, I think every organization gave out a reusable bag or a reusable bottle. The problem, of course, is that this is inefficient if we do not reuse such bags or bottles enough. The UK Environment Agency in 2006 estimated that a cotton bag requires reuse 131 times in the best-case scenario to equal one single-use plastic bag. So let us replace branding exercises with hard policy decisions. Sir, we will always have the true believers who do everything they can to minimize waste. We must salute them. We would benefit tremendously from increasing their numbers. But for the rest of us, it is a price effect. And I admit to failing to set an example in how I live. I may care about the environment, but I drive, I fly, I use air conditioning. I would do this less if the prices went up. To try to make amends, I bought solar power, which is more expensive. I've tried to eat less meat, but I can't bring myself to eat insects just yet. I'm only human, but I'm trying to be better. So let's build a sustainable Singapore, but without illusions on the nature of people and of markets. I support this bill.